Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to the Infinite Harmony Podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Dragon. Today we'll be continuing the third part of our conversation about the existence of Gaia. As always, if you haven't heard those previous episodes, I do recommend going back and giving it a listen. And if you want, just jump on this thread and see where it takes you. In the previous two episodes, we covered the idea that our Earth is alive and conscious in a way that is different than our consciousness. We talked about sensory gating and our ability to feel the aliveness of our planet, the connection of our senses to the senses of the Earth. We also discussed the nature of consciousness and how it is experienced, and what it means to actually feel this aliveness of everything around us. Today, we'll look even deeper into the nature of a conscious Earth and our possible role in the greater ecology. So, if the Earth were conscious, what would it feel like? How would it express itself? How would it express its consciousness? What is the language of Earth? Is she communicating with us right now as we sit here listening to this podcast? Does she feel us? This podcast will touch on the nature of consciousness in many forms, as it is often considered one of the most fundamental questions of our time. With the rise of AI, the growing awareness of the depth of communication within the plant and fungal kingdom, humans are suspecting that consciousness is not just experienced by us, or is defined by our ability for self-reflection or abstraction. Though I must admit, our particular form of consciousness is quite an interesting one. But there's still many questions surrounding its nature. Can it exist outside of the body, as in the form of a spirit or non-biological entity? Can it communicate across non-physical channels? Is biology even required for consciousness? Is the rock conscious? There's a reason it's called the hard problem. And though we don't expect to solve it today, we will look deeply into Buhner's proposition, and those that came before him, that the Earth itself is alive, intelligent, and exhibits a level of beingness that we can and do experience. We've discussed the states of consciousness we experience when writing or reading, when listening to music, and how it is akin to the state of dreaming, where our physical bodies take the back seat to the ephemeral feelings and qualities of creativity and imagination, where time takes on a different quality, sometimes disappearing altogether. This imaginal realm, a realm humans occupy all the time, is where we meet the conscious nature of Earth, of Gaia. Once we can feel the pulsing of her heartbeat within ours, perhaps the greater meaning of our existence will come to light. As Buhner quotes in the Tao Te Ching, "Who will prefer the jingle of jade pendants if they once have heard the stone growing in a cliff? Who would prefer the sound of honking horns and espresso machines once we can hear the subtle song of the Earth? She's always singing a song, both figuratively and literally, weaving herself within her own story, responding to the constant flow of inputs, of information within her self-organized system. Her skin-like crust is alive with movement. Her magma blood flows beneath her. Her temperature is regulated by her movement. The gravity that keeps her spinning at a perfect pace, like a beating heart." Buhner says, quote, "The Earth initiates continual alterations in the form and behavior of everything in the system in order to maintain optimum self-organized homeodynamics. Those potentials emerge out of the ocean of being, in which the Earth has roots, out of the quantum world where all potential forms and behaviors exist simultaneously, in response to the need that Earth expresses, in response to the shiftings in the state of self-organization. The new forms and behaviors that come into being are continual informational gestalts about the communicatory interaction that is occurring between Earth and its environments, both of them, its external environment, the out there, For Earth is not an isolated event. It is embedded in the universe. And the inhere, that is, the billions upon trillions of subparts that we know as ecoranges, ecozones, forests, rivers, oceans, trees, dolphins, people, birds, bacteria, viruses, and on and on and on. End quote. As above, so below. An old Hermetic axiom and golden thread of this podcast. Embedded within us is the knowledge of how Earth experiences its own existence. Embedded in our dreamlike states of consciousness, we experience in both the waking and sleeping state, is the nature of Gaia's own awareness, the dreaming of the Earth. So strap on your seatbelts, Earthlings, as we take one last ride across the galaxy in search of Gaia, and may our rockets burn true. Today on the Infinite Harmony Podcast. Now, to understand where Buhner is going with this, think of the human body. We often perceive consciousness as having some kind of active agency over itself, say, choice or preference. A conscious being can contemplate choices, abstract different possible futures around those choices, and make the best choice for itself. I am a conscious being because I bought a red Ferrari, which represents my unique expression of the universe. And though I had a choice of 100 different cars and colors, I choose this. But think about all the processes executed for us on a daily basis that are far more essential to our existence. Our autonomic nervous system manages every aspect of our bodily functions, including prompting us when we are hungry, cold, or tired so that we can respond. But most functions don't require our attention or even a response. The process of regulating our body temperature, the alkalinity of our blood, immune responses, all the organ functions, cellular reproduction, hormonal regulation, this all happens without even as much as a hunch that it's even happening until we go looking around at other bodies in the name of science. For thousands of years, we just lived and did what most other animals did. And somehow, we consider ourselves conscious. Buhner would say that most self-organizing systems exist in this mostly unconscious state, in the state of deep dreaming. Most of our body is in a deep dreaming state. Just as we dream while sleeping, our bodies lie peacefully in bed while our mind takes us on wild adventures. Imagine if you were an alien who came to Earth and the human beings that were here only existed in a state of sleep and dream, just lying about on the floor. To the aliens, we wouldn't seem much different than the plants. We certainly wouldn't appear conscious. And yet we would be living in worlds within worlds deep within the imaginal realm of our own minds. Imagine if this level of subconscious coordination between our biological self-organized systems was not available to us. Imagine if the function of our organs, the cellular communication and reproduction and homeostasis we experience required our constant attention. We would hardly be able to have a conversation, let alone take the time to daydream up the world we've created. This incredibly efficient, intelligent, and adaptive function of biology is, in a way, far more capable and advanced than the conscious mind. This is the dreaming of the Earth. You know, over the course of my contemplative journey, which has spanned decades, I've grappled with the notion that reverberates through the corridors of Eastern wisdom, this idea that humanity slumbers. And to attain enlightenment is to rouse oneself to the authentic essence of reality and the self. This inner struggle, I have to confess, has often arisen from a sense of self-absorption that seems inherent to the pursuit. In other words, I want to become enlightened because it serves me.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by hell.
The Taoists in particular were notorious for their withdrawal from the world, seeking solace in the remote recesses of these towering mountains to study the Tao. I couldn't help but wonder, what contribution does such self-imposed isolation make to the world? What's the relevance of self-realization when the edifice of human civilization appears to teeter on the precipice of collapse, its downfall an ever-encroaching certainty? Is it just for the sake of my own inner tranquility? Would this newfound awareness permit me to defy the laws of physics and levitate? This is what I wondered, and it's perplexing. But the key might lie in this idea of the dreaming of the earth. Could it be that the profound Eastern Enlightenment, heralded by meditation, is not the awakening to our personal perception of consciousness alone, but rather a deeper dream in which we commune with the all-encompassing consciousness that underpins the entire cosmos? A meta-awareness, if you will, that extends beyond the confines of our individual selves. This shift in perspective lends a novel dimension to this quest for enlightenment. It transforms it from a pursuit of self-indulgence into a communion with the collective consciousness that threads through all facets of existence. In this reimagining, enlightenment is no longer a solitary endeavor, but a means to weave the golden threads that unite all living entities, Earth itself, and the vast expanse of the universe. Which makes me wonder, were the animists of the past already enlightened? For me, this perspective lends a broader purpose to the journey. It becomes a path not solely for personal serenity, but also for comprehending one's role within the grand tapestry of existence. The cultivation of awareness that holds potential far beyond personal growth, that empowers individuals to act as stewards to the interconnected web of life, fostering empathy and championing a more sustainable, equitable world. In this way, these doors of perception we've been speaking of propel us into a deeper relationship with the greater dreaming. These metaphors of dream and awake, they fall into a sea of deeper meaning. A world where plants and humans talk without language as we know it. A world where the autonomic systems of our body are not just regulated by some internal anthropomorphic system, but by the hand of earth and sun and moon, of wind and stars and sea. As we dream our world into being while the body does what the body does, so does the earth, who dreams as she maintains the currents and tides, jet streams and volcanoes. The point is, if most of our biological functions are handled by this magical self-regulating system that we are mostly unaware of, and yet we consider ourselves very much alive and very much conscious, then how is the Earth any different? We are comprised mostly of a system of responses, a complex and dynamic system that regulates thousands of different biological functions every second. And every second on Earth, 1 billion functions are executed throughout the atmosphere, oceans, land masses, to aid in the stabilizing of the atmospheric temperature and molecule level. Gaia is integrating an unfathomable flow of information and is somehow sensing itself. Or, perhaps, she is also using us as her sensory input. Perhaps the billions upon billions of nervous systems are her biofeedback loop, each of our own dreamed movements aligning like a massive school of dancers, billowing out into geometric patterns in the dreaming of Gaia, stimulating response deep within her, resulting in harmonic, self-organized homeostasis. And this has been going on for billions of years. And what if Gaia is responding to us now? We may not truly be able to see it for a few thousand years. Her time is not our time. Think about it. What would the response to an extinction event asteroid look like? Just imagine it. The big one hits and 90% of life on planet Earth is wiped out. There's 1,000 years of darkness. Now imagine watching this event along with the next 100,000 years time-lapse in 5 minutes. You know, like your iPhone can do. What would we see? What would be evident then? Life veining out from certain pockets of the planet like tendrils of a vine, searching for light? Would the oceans rise to meet the new epoch of plant life? Would glaciers preserve various seeds or bacteria that would eventually and methodically be released over a millennia? How can we, as humans, with a few thousand years of recorded observation and some abstract scientific data, claim to know how Gaia thinks or moves? How could bacteria in your gut ever possibly know the life you have lived? Though Gaia is constantly self-regulating the activity in her biosphere, you know, all the plants, animals, humans, bacteria, this is by no means a closed system. Our greatest input is without question our sun, and its mythic counterpart, our single, beautiful Luna goddess, our moon, who deeply affects the rhythms of water and life around and within us. But our solar system, nearby stars, and the rest of the galaxy also have their effect on us. According to Buhner, the Earth receives over 80 million pounds of extraterrestrial matter from the galaxy every year, and apparently not at random. Apparently, astrophysicists have noticed bursts of cosmic matter being generated from Saturn and Jupiter, making their way here, affecting asteroids and comets, which in turn affect their orbits relative to the Earth. Such changes are not without their dangers, and our ability to notice these celestial movements should also be noted. Despite our penchant for resource extraction and opulence, we've also become extremely efficient sensory organs. If Gaia did wake up from her dreaming and could tap our conscious information streams, she would suddenly have a language for all of her biological functions and capacities for measurement of a myriad of atmospheric parameters and so much more. We've effectively developed the proverbial blood pressure gauge for Gaia. Maybe that's what all this consciousness and language is for. Or maybe it's even bigger than that. What are humans anyway? We know that in complex biological systems, each organism has a role to play, whether that organism knows it or not. Think about how many different cells and bacteria are contributing to your existence right now. Without the trillions of bacteria that live on your skin, or the microbiome that makes up your digestive tract, you could not exist. All these things contribute to your biology. More importantly, these bacteria exist and function without our knowledge or conscious input. Consider this poem by British poet Anne Stevenson.
And this is how the foxglove keeps its sex life in order. 2 anthers, adolescent in a hurry to dehice. Let fly too soon, so pollen lies in drifts about the floor. Along swims bumbler bee and makes an undercoat of this. Reverses, exits, lets it fall by accident next door. So ripeness climbs the bells of digitalis flower by flower, undistracted by a mind or a design, or by desire.
Undistracted by a mind or a design or by desire. There's that dreaming again. Yet the bee and flower play their roles so precisely. But humans? Ask 100 humans what our role is on Earth, and you will likely get 100 different answers. Ask humans if our actions are impacting the planet, and most will agree they are. Now consider, despite our awareness of self, that we also have a role in the Gaian system, and that perhaps we are not aware of it. More specifically, our actions and contributions to the Earth through the transmutation of Gaia's resources, of crude oil and coal into atmospheric carbon, and the mining of metals, and all that we do to produce civilization are as natural as the beaver building dams or the spiders building webs. Consider that our ecological function is one of our many autonomously run systems, like breathing or sweating. Perhaps all this time, we're just doing what we've been biologically programmed to do. We are many things, humans, but our greatest achievement is our engineering, our problem solving. In fashioning the bow and arrow, in fabricating the plow, the printing press, we ultimately are learning to conserve energy, to create and accomplish more with less input. Now, without going into the caveats of this, of which there are many, and which we will most certainly cover over time, our harnessing of energy is akin to moving towards a more perfected state of thermodynamics, a fight against entropy. Let's take a moment to talk about light. Light is perhaps the most perfected state of energy, moving at a constant speed throughout the universe without losing energy. How many religions talk about the higher states of spirit moving toward light or becoming light? Consider this for a moment, not just as a metaphorical idea about the nature of spirit, but about the molecular power of light and how we humans strive towards that level of perfection. To be beings of light is to perfect the laws of energy. We are moving towards something, and Gaia is the egg that is giving birth to a potentially radical form of life, one that may even extend itself beyond the confines of biology. An acceptance of an integrated Gaian perspective is the rejection of human action as being separate or independent of the greater system, which also includes awakening to our impact and adjustments. The shift from animism to the Anthropocene may appear like an emergence of a certain kind of free will, the kind that puts the human species at the apex of an evolutionary scale that somehow breaks free of this biological system of evolution itself. But according to Lovelock, remember him, founder of the Gaian theory, and many other thinkers, this is just not the case. We've only alienated ourselves from that which is most precious. And the fact that we are slowly dying at the hands of our own creations, or more specifically, their byproducts, and are being consumed by our own neurosis and pathologies is a testament that we must reconsider the Anthropocene. On the other hand, the fact that we have developed the ability for abstract thought, conceptualizing past, future, change, measurement and application and storage of information beyond what we can hold in the mind at any given moment is undoubtedly significant. There certainly seems to be unique aspects to our intelligence not found in other life forms, except possibly Gaia herself. Now, James Lovelock spends a great deal of time laying out an argument that the complex homeostasis required to support a planetary biosphere is not one of chance. And just as a car will not miraculously keep running without proper maintenance, a biosphere requires regulation and limitation to maintain equilibrium. The temperature of the planet, its oxygen levels, salt levels in the ocean, all of these parameters are constantly being regulated to support life. This is what we're trying to establish. So then, why humans? Why bring these little homeostasis-wrecking, fuel-burning, clear-cutting, silicon-mining bipeds to screw everything up? Unless, of course, we really are aliens.
Did he just say we might be aliens? Ooh, damn. He said it. Yup. AI is the new black, son.
The question of why humans, and the development of their prefrontal cortex, and that annoying thing we call consciousness, is puzzling from a biological standpoint. But perhaps its function, as we looked at in our co-emergence episode, is a function that allows us to cooperatively awaken to and participate as agents of a greater whole, and experience choice. Perhaps, again, part of our awakening to consciousness is Gaia's awakening to herself, that our agency is a greater awareness of Gaia's own agency, that our consciousness is part of a greater whole, and thus our responsibility to that whole only increases. Through us, Gaia can measure her oxygen levels, her temperature, in the same way we can do for our individual bodies. Imagine if your white blood cells suddenly became conscious agents, and one morning you could hear their little voices in your head identifying viruses and preemptively warning us of a viral invasion or cancerous cells. Would this not be a useful evolution? Imagine if your gut biome could directly communicate the necessary foods to maintain optimum homeostasis. No more bloating, no more bad gas. Perhaps in this very same way we can, or even have, become the agents of the planet, with part of our purpose evolving to become the sense organs of the planet. But maybe it goes even deeper than that.
This shit's going deep, yo.
Like Grand Canyon deep?
Like black hole deep, Dunny.
And perhaps my favorite part of plant intelligence in the imaginal realm, the part I'm constantly referring to with friends whenever I've had, a couple beers or something.
Bro, I'm telling you. We're the sperm of the earth.
Oh, come on, not that stuff again.
Quit with that stuff already. What is wrong with this? I ain't no sperm.
Buhner outrightly expresses that perhaps the most significant function of the human species is something akin to a pollinator.
Yo, dog, we're pollinators.
Word.
We are part of the reproductive components of this living system of Earth. One of the primary opponents of the Gaian theory is the teleological nature of the planet as a living system and the problem of other planets, or lack thereof. That there are no failed Gaias out there, at least that we know of. You know what we do know? We know that bacteria can survive in space because we sent them there. And they came back alive. Scientists conducted an experiment at the International Space Station and found that Deinococcus bacteria can survive in space. Moon mission studies determined years ago that bacteria can survive on the hulls of rockets. The radical changes in temperature and, the whole vacuum of space and radiation. Scientists have studied spores of Bacillus subtilis, tardigrades, and the Deinococcus radiodurans. Don't ask me if I'm pronouncing any of that right. At varying levels, these bacteria have survived UV radiation, ionizing radiation, the extreme cold of space, and could possibly survive interplanetary travel. They have survival mechanisms and processes of repair, and even have restructured their own DNA on the fly to quickly develop UV radiation resistance. And if they can get a little help from encapsulation, preservation, extended time in dormancy does not seem to be a problem. In 1996, Dr. Raul J. Cano, a professor at the California Polytechnic State University at San Luis Obispo, revived a 30-million-year-old bacteria from a fossilized bee's stomach. 30 million years. Bacteria, it seems, are life's time and space capsules. Humans have now actively, even if unknowingly, brought bacteria into space. Is it possible that our drive to explore, one of the most foundational aspects of our humanness, our drive to create technology and harness energy that has led to the very machines that can propel us beyond the gravity of the planet itself, that these actions are driven by evolution, by the will of Gaia, that we are in fact a tool of a greater planetary desire to survive and reproduce? Think about it. Let's take crude oil. Really, think about it. Crude oil is the product of a death of trillions of tiny life forms and millions of years of intense heat and pressure. And it's everywhere. We've likely pumped trillions of barrels and still have billions of barrels left to pump. So what evolutionary function does the death of billions of life forms that coalesce into a highly flammable substance, a concentration of energy so great that with time and intelligence, we were able to make rockets, refine the crude oil into a fuel that can propel us over 5,000 miles per hour and break the gravitational pull of the planet?
Yes! Yes! We will build our own rocket! Using this and whatever else we can find!
Why? If we are driven by Darwinian evolution, how does a rocket ship or an automobile, the desire to climb the mountain both physically and metaphorically, translate to species survival or reproduction? Because looking at the history of human action, our propensity to explore the unknown, both physical and in abstract space, seems as intrinsic to us as sex. So we're getting into the realm of teleology here, which is a way of saying that if we look at the end result of something, we can understand its purpose. In other words, oil is here to be used as rocket fuel. and humans are here to build rockets. But more importantly, that there is an underlying drive in everything. Remember that idea that atoms have a choice from the last episode? Why do we have consciousness? And despite our ability to experience choice and rationality, make the choices we do. Is our search for meaning just a microcosm of the planet's search for meaning? Or the universe in its entirety? We here at the Church of Infinite Harmony don't have a particular creation story, nor do we subscribe to an end game for our congregation. There's no cookies promised at the end of your life if you're a good little human. We acknowledge the great mystery of existence, but that doesn't mean we subscribe to meaninglessness either. Maybe this is obvious at this point, but I certainly get the feeling that something is going on. The universe is coherent, and clearly, at least from my point of view, we are moving towards something. So years ago, I heard this TED Talk where a scientist was explaining that in order for the Big Bang to have happened, the particles of the universe would have to be organized so precisely that the chance of our universe being random was nearly impossible. And look, I'm no physicist, but I've heard that the exact balance of physical constants, the formation and distribution of matter, and the energy density of the universe following the Big Bang would require such fine tuning that it is often cited as evidence of the unlikely and special nature of our universe, and suggests that even slight variations in these initial conditions could have made the universe uninhabitable. And when I say slight, I mean nearing mathematical improbability. We're talking hundreds of numbers slight. The truth is, if you do a little research, we are a long way from understanding the origin of the universe. String theory, holographic universe, inflationary multiverses, ekbiotic universes, that does not even sound right. I guess my point is, even for a rational scientist, I would hope that a meaningless universe at this point is improbable enough that it warrants allocating a higher probability to meaning, and that we are a part of it, and very likely not the center of it. So what is our part? Entertain just for a moment that humans and their rockets are what propel the possibility of planetary seeding into the universe. Like a flower that produces seeds and attracts the bees by its scent to spread pollen. Perhaps we are just celestial pollinators. Buhner writes, quote, Gaia always innovates on earlier forms. Wind pollination gave way to pollinator pollination, as it is much more efficient for the pollen to go exactly where it needs to go. Human pollinators are now taking the bacteria exactly where they need to go. We inevitably think it's all about us, not realizing that we are in fact performing cross-pollination. I mean, that's a pretty cool reason to exist. Are we planetary pollinators? Is Elon Musk's drive to colonize Mars nothing more than a biological function programmed in us by Gaia herself? I'll admit, the compulsion of humans to explore vast inner and outer spaces, to know ourselves. If ever there were a fate written in the book of destiny, a rally cry of unity and manifestation of a collective endeavor as a species, it's our journey to the stars. Does our biological function, our evolutionary destiny, and spiritual purpose all coalesce into one dream? To become a truly interplanetary species and carry the seeds of life across the galaxy? Well, I'll tell you this. If so, this is a cautionary tale, a journey fraught with challenges that test our wisdom as much as our capacities. The dream of being a spacefaring species goes beyond the technicalities of rocket engines and orbital mechanics. It touches on fundamental questions about who we are and what we could become. Are we the kind of beings that can overcome our basest instincts and pettiest squabbles to unify in a quest that transcends individual lifetimes and national boundaries? If so, the stars are not just a physical destination, but a metaphysical one, guiding us towards a future that redeems the struggle and aspirations of the past. It's not just about getting to another celestial body. It's about becoming the kind of society and individuals we must become in order to do so. And to do so, we must find peace within ourselves. We must become stewards of all life, not just our lives. We must return to the place wherein lies the spirit of the earth. We must become stewards of wisdom. We've got a ways to go, but I think we'll get there.
Round and round the earth is turning, turning ever into morning, and from morning into night. Within the light, the day is always turning, turning through the dark, how deep the night, cycling through time in a spiral, dance among the song of the stars, how bright the dawn is. Within the light, the day is always turning, turning through the dark, how deep the night, cycling through time in a spiral, dance among the song of the stars, how bright the dawn ever into the light, the day is always turning, turning through the dark.
What will life be like then, when we are stewards of life instead of consumers of it? What does the world look like where the humans are in rhythm with the indifference of nature? Nature who has no voice, yet speaks to us. Nature who is indifferent to us, yet nurtures us. Nature who has no outside and no inside, that suffers no opposition to itself, that is not moved by unnatural influence, is not the expression of an order so much as it is the display of a perfect indifference on nature's part to all matters cultural. What happens when the idea of nature no longer exists? When humans and nature become one again? When we become indifferent to our own personal pursuits in the spirit of something far greater? Is this what it takes to become an interstellar species? Or can a species that dominates nature also find its way into space? There are plenty of circumstances found in nature where a mother must die to give birth. In the quiet theater of nature's grand design, the life cycle of a flower teaches us a poignant ballet of existence, a symphony of silent whispers that resonates with the essence of life itself. From the tender embrace of earth, a seed awakens, stretching towards the sun, feeling the warmth. As it blossoms, it reveals a certain beauty, a sisterhood of petals, painted with the hues of dawn, each unfurling like the delicate fingers of a newborn. This spectacle of bloom is a fleeting moment in the sun's arc, a transient whisper of color and fragrance in the vastness of time. And yet its inevitable withering is a return to the void from which it came, a surrender to the cycle that gave it life. In the quiet demise of its vibrant being, the flower leaves behind the specter of its beauty, and a promise renewed in the seeds that fall, a testament to this enduring cycle of birth, bloom, and return. Perhaps this is the destiny of Gaia, to give all she has so that life may pervade the galaxy. Do we as humans even have a choice in the matter? These are the questions we ask at the Church of Infinite Harmony. To follow the way of our ethos is to walk towards a harmonious existence with all that exists here on this planet. To once again engage in the miracle of tending the garden, stewarding the animals, of returning to a work where our survival instinct guides us not toward hoarding resources, but a willingness to be alive, to celebrate the seed, the sow, the plant, the fruit, the harvest, the festival, and the death of it all, but never to give up the hope that Gaia may be our home for another few billion years. Because as the eons unfurl, a future looms where the sun, our star, the very wellspring of energy that fuels life's myriad forms, will take the stage for its final act and swell into a red giant, its its dying breaths reaching out to consume its planetary offspring in one last incinerating, luminous embrace. That inevitable conclusion to Earth's saga would not merely be an end, but a coda. A final crescendo to the symphony of our existence that is played out on the surface. That final act of destruction, in its essence, is a transformation on a cosmic scale, a reminder that from endings spring new beginnings in the endless cycle of creation and dissolution that defines our universe. But her death at our hands? Well, that would be something altogether different. And here at the Church of Infinite Harmony, we walk the road of poiesis. A poiesis that renounces the economics of continual growth and extraction for the benefit of comfort, safety, and convenience. There's a parallel between the felt sense of aliveness and hazard. Author J.G. Bennett wrote an entire book on the idea. But beyond that, whatever world lies in front of us, the one where we come out on the other end of the myriad of existential threats that hover around us, it involves the release of a need for comfort and safety and embracing the challenge that lies before us. For paradoxically, our need for safety has become hazardous to our existence. Almost everything we've built revolves around our desire to more efficiently and comfortably meet our base needs and to enhance the experience of existence. I'm not saying we have to give up snowboarding or jet skis or movie theaters, but when was the last time you allowed yourself to suffer the feeling of not having your needs met willingly? Look, there's about 15 golden threads I could follow here. Intentional suffering as a means of transformation, the illusion that life is anything but safe, that comfort is actually a numbing feeling to the sensory experience of life and existence. Or how about the abandonment of the rites of passage, where we learned humility by subjecting ourselves to the power and magnitude of the wild, and that by abandoning rites of passage, we now live in a world run by children. Or maybe we should talk about how our newfound pathologies and diseases seem to grow as our indifference to our pollution and our environment grows. I mean, does anyone really think that the microplastics that exist in just about everything we eat, or the chemicals, quote, known to the state of California to cause cancer, that are also in everything we buy aren't affecting our sanity, or the health of our DNA, or our reproductive systems? That we can sit on furniture made with chemicals that would kill us if ingested without effect? Look, I work in a wood shop, and despite my best intentions, there's some pretty nasty stuff going into our everyday wares. All this talk about being the pollinators of the planet and becoming interplanetary species is nice, but that doesn't happen if we don't get our shit together. Or if it does, at the expense of our planet and all the non-human species, then we are destined to bring the terror of our domination to the rest of the galaxy. If we have any chance of overcoming the existential crisis and embrace a future where humanity harmonizes with the environment, we need to consider radical transformative actions. These actions must cut across societal, economic, and political spheres, challenge conventional wisdom, and push the boundaries of what's considered feasible. It's about envisioning a future that radically redefines our relationship with the planet and then daring to take the steps necessary to realize that vision. What we're talking about are ideas as radical as global ecological constitutions, binding intentional agreements that place health of the planet at the center of all nationalist policies and persons, an agreement that pushes the boundaries of democracy and regulation. We're not just talking about environmental protection laws. We're talking about redefining the very principles upon which societies operate, and nothing short of ratifying the earth itself as a living being with the same rights as each and every one of us would allow the human species to change direction. Ecological impact must become a primary factor in every legislative decision, making it unlawful for any action, corporate or governmental, to significantly harm the environment. Yes, making Earth a citizen, this whole talk of Earth being a conscious being. Look, even if that turns out not to be precisely the case, which I don't know how we would prove that to be true or false, living a life where we consider her a citizen, where we consider her alive, That's a game changer. That changes the way that we relate to everything. We have to let go of the idea that everything on this planet we've deemed as resources is ours for the taking just because we can. Mining, fracking, deforestation, damming rivers. Now, probably before we can pull off something like that, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. And the answer, if we ever get to come to it, is not nearly as important as the question. How did we get this way? I was talking to a small congregation recently about what makes an adult, or an elder. A group of adults were taking part in a meditation program here, and we were instructed to meditate in silence, and they chose to break that silence when unobserved. Another member entered sacred space after it had been closed to the public because they forgot a personal object in the space. In both situations, did they not only break the rules, but they did not impose consequences on themselves for doing so. Later, in review of these actions, I shared the idea that an adult, or an elder, however you want to look at it, imposes consequences upon themselves for poor choices. This is what true responsibility looks like. Elders don't wait to be asked for an apology or for the police to show up when they've done something wrong. They bow before those they've wronged. They apologize on behalf of their ancestors, and they make an offering of forgiveness and create reciprocity. We can continue to plunder the planet, but if you're paying attention, the consequences are mounting. And until we start imposing consequences upon ourselves, we are only drawing closer towards the earth imposing a consequence that can result in the inability of humans to coexist the way we do. You know, as I'm writing this, suddenly I'm thinking about the book of Revelations. The redeemed elders in white beholding the throne of God, standing alongside the four living creatures that represent all of nature. And it is the slain lamb, who the Christians would later call Jesus, who opens the book and unleashes the apocalypse upon the world. A slain lamb unleashes the apocalypse upon the world. And the four horsemen of the apocalypse? Conquest, war, famine, and eventually death. Is it already happening? For what happens when the great wind comes and shakes away the unripened figs from the tree? What happens if we can no longer produce adequate sustenance for 8 billion people? According to the UN, 800 million humans do not have adequate food and go to bed hungry more often than not. Our neuroses as a species is that we barrel forward without understanding consequence, not only immediate, but of a second and third order effect. Microplastics in our food, mercury, lead, and cadmium in our water, all unintended consequences of technology and progress. The rise of depression, anxiety, loneliness as a result of social media, the polarization of politics driven by economic progress of clickbait, COVID-19. That's right, we're going to go there. Because look, in March of 2023, a year ago, the House Oversight Committee, that's the, House of Representatives, the branch of government that often looks like a couple of frat houses competing in college games. Yeah, those guys. They came to the conclusion that the Wuhan lab leak theory was, in fact, the most likely origin of COVID-19. I'll put a link to the article in the show notes. We're talking man-made. Dr. Robert Redfield, former director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, also known as the CDC, testified how science indicates COVID-19 infections were likely the result of an accidental lab leak in Wuhan. Nicholas Wade testified his knowledge on the manufactured campaign to discredit the lab leak theory. He pointed out that scientists kept in line with the natural origin camp led by Drs. Fauci and Collins because of their dependence on government grants, and that the media failed to challenge the forced narrative, that Fauci and the others were drafting a narrative to the American public and the rest of the world. Follow the rabbit hole a little longer, and 6 months later, that same House Oversight Committee heard testimony from a whistleblower alleging that the Central Intelligence Agency offered 6 analysts significant monetary incentives to change their position on COVID-19's origin. The whistleblower, who presents as a highly credible senior-level CIA officer, alleges that of the 7 members assigned to the CIA team tasked with analyzing COVID-19 origins, 6 officers concluded that the virus likely originated from a lab in Wuhan, China. The CIA then, however, allegedly offered financial incentives to 6 of the experts involved in the investigation to change their conclusion in favor of a natural origin. So it's no longer a conspiracy theory. This is all posted on our government's website. But look, I digress. The point is, second-order consequences of experimentation resulted in the pandemic. We have no idea what we're doing. It should come to no surprise that I'm a fan of the Emerald podcast. One of the most brilliant episodes of the podcast and its creator, Josh Ray, is on AI as a true force of magic that we have not even the slightest inclination of what the consequences of uncorking this genie's bottle would bring. Now, genies don't actually exist. They are a romanticization of the jinn, these pre-Islamic spirits of Arabic culture with great power who are not to be toyed with. Shrey retells the allegory of the sorcerer's apprentice, who fancies himself worthy of enacting the simplest of spells, which, as we know from Disney's adaptation, spirals quickly out of control. If we can actually cast the spell of artificial general intelligence, we have no idea what the consequences will be. As it stands, AI is poised to take over entire economic sectors, displace millions of jobs, with no real plan of how or where those humans are going to work to sustain themselves, which will inevitably lead to a growing disparity between the owners of the tech and the companies which implement the AI and the working class. And make no mistake, we still very much live in a world where the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. Now, I'm tempted here to move into a treatise on the destructive nature of capitalism, the feeding of the beast Moloch, but we're going to save that for another episode. We're still talking about Earth, about Gaia, and about the potential of the human species. And yet, in order to realize our potential and preserve our existence in our biosphere, our politics and economics will have to change. As I've said before, we can't talk about the principles of this church without also understanding how our political and economic behavior affect our ability to live by these principles. In effect, we need more principles that govern both economics and politics. For instance, humans need resources to exist. As we've discussed, we are transmuters of energy. We extract energy from our environment. There's no way around it. And yet millions of humans still do not have access to the most basic of resources. Creating a code of universal basic resource allotment would ensure that every individual has access to essential resources such as clean water, whole food, and renewable energy. We're talking about a shift from market-driven resource economy to a rights-based model. And not just for humans, but for all the animals and plants, which inevitably means that the economy has to stop growing and start scaling down to accommodate the rest of the biological inhabitants of this planet. Built into such a model is establishing metrics of quality of life, quality of environment, and sustainability of resources in respect to the environment. Maybe it's time to stop building cities in the desert without understanding the second and third order effects of taking water from different regions to water the lawns. Project Save Earth Redirect Number 42. Stop terraforming the desert into a suburb. And beyond basic resources for survival, as a species, we have to ease our obsession with technology and opulence and simplify existence. Now, mind you, there's still a substantial disparity between the wealthy and the poor nations of Earth. The United States is not the most opulent country on the list, but compare us to, say, Kenya, and you start to see a stark contrast in how much the average citizen consumes. For instance, the average consumption of BTUs, or raw thermal energy, of a Kenyan citizen is about 15 million per year. In the US, about 300 million, or 20 times more. 20. Carbon footprints? The average Kenyan exhausts about 0.3 tons per year. Here in the US, 15.5 tons of CO2. 50 times more. Do we need 50 times more than other humans? There's been a lot of talk about privilege over the years in this country, between races, classes, mostly in respect to social welfare or social access. What about ecological privilege? In a world where the media does a wonderful job giving us topics to argue about, all relative to ourselves and our societies, who's talking about the privilege of the first world countries over the Earth's resources? Look, Antifa and the Proud Boys are still driving BMWs and Ford F-150s. I know, that's so 2020, but still. If our civil rights coalesce into a liberal utopia here in the US, it's all for nothing against the backdrop of a failing ecosystem at the hands of our consumption. So yes, culture warriors, I'm suggesting you get your priorities right. Until we can create a culture of radical conservation and simplicity, the human species experiment is barreling towards extinction. I would love to be wrong. But what if I'm not? It takes courage to curb consumption in the same way it takes courage to recognize privilege. The success of our individual freedoms tends to result in the failure of our communal reciprocity. Earning freedom to make socially unhindered choice does not liberate us from global responsibility, of ecological responsibility. If we breastfed from our mothers for the entirety of our lives, literally, we would probably kill them. And at some point, the amount of nutrition an adult requires outpaces what the mother can provide. But in this situation, being an adult means making better choices not to overconsume our planet, not to put our lives above the life of a redwood, or a salmon, or prairie. Being an adult is self-imposing the consequence that we don't get everything we want all the time. But with enough discipline and practice, we make the effective choice and everyone gets what they want everywhere. All life on Gaia. The next phase of our evolution is a refinement. We must remove the impurities in our thinking systems and clarify our capacity to generate our resources. And it doesn't mean we go back to living in mud huts and eating only rice. It doesn't mean we can't live a life where we experience the greatest of technologies and in living conditions beyond even what we have now. It means, however, that we have to redefine value, quality, and really think about what a world can look like for humans that doesn't devour the whole planet. Does one family need 4,000 square feet of living space? Does one man need $200 billion of private wealth? Do we even need private wealth? Does everyone need their own car? Again, our economic actions are unequivocally tied to our spirituality. Why do you think for thousands of years the spiritually devout rejected wealth and the material world? Out of piousness? I think it was out of the wisdom that spirit cannot be found among the opulence of society. To love earth is to begin to empty ourselves of the desires to consume her, to acknowledge the life we inevitably consume to exist. There's only one way to escape the cycle of life, and that is death. By being born here on this beautiful blue orb, hurling through space, we receive the gift of transmuting energy in many forms to maintain that existence, to express our divinity through creation, imagination, dreaming, and love. Until these biological transformational apparatuses known as bodies decay enough that they can no longer transmute the resources of air and water and fire and earth, we are here to do exactly that. But our freedom to choose how determines the value of our species. We have the power of gods in our creation and destruction. We wield energies that rival the sun. If we can harness the wisdom of those same gods, then perhaps we shall leave our home planet someday, having learned how to steward life and not annihilate it. We will become interstellar bastions of life and peace and carry the wisdom to bring forth its seed. Well, friends, I hope you've enjoyed this episode and this series, and I look forward to hearing from you. As always, feel free to ask questions or offer feedback in our forum at infiniteharmony.org, which will include the transcripts of each episode for quotes and references. I'm always down for conversation, people. Hit me up on that forum. Go ask a question. Give a comment. If you don't like it, tell me. If you like it, tell me. If you're interested in supporting this podcast or our work, you can become a donating member of the Church of Infinite Harmony. You can donate any amount you want, once a month or as often as you like. As a nonprofit organization, this podcast and our organization is supported by your donations. So please, if you would like to give, then give. Special shout out to the host of musicians on this episode, my man Azira, to Coyote, Don Gato the Ninth, Mattia Kali, and special thanks to Alexa Sunshine Rose for the reading of Anne Stevenson's poem, The Miracle of the Bees and the Foxgloves, and for her song, Round and Round. All right, friends, that's all I got. Until next time, peace.